The judge looked at my husband for a long moment before he said anything at all. That silence is the part I keep replaying. Not the fluorescent lights of courtroom 6 in the Callaway County Courthouse, not the dry click of my own throat when I tried to swallow, not even the moment my husband, the man I had been married to for 9 years, stood up and pointed across the room at a man I barely knew and called him my secret boyfriend in front of a judge, two attorneys, and a court reporter typing every word. No. What stays with me is the look on Judge Eleanor Voss's face right after that accusation landed, and the single question she asked him next, a question that took less than 10 seconds to ask and ended up taking apart everything my husband had spent 4 months building. My name is Renee Castor. I was 36 years old when my husband Dale filed for divorce, 37 by the time we sat across from each other in front of a judge. I want to tell you how I ended up in that courtroom, because none of it started there. It started quietly, the way most of these things do, in a marriage that looked fine from every angle except the one that actually mattered. I married Dale Castor 8 years after we met at a continuing education conference in Asheville, both of us there for unrelated reasons. Him for a real estate licensing course, me representing a small interior design studio I had just taken partial ownership of. He was steady, even tempered, good with people in that low-key way that made him excellent at his job, and mildly forgettable at parties. For a long time, steady felt like exactly what I wanted. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood outside Asheville, a 2-story with a wraparound porch that needed paint every few years and never quite got it. We had a tabby cat named Pepper who hated everyone except me. We had a routine. Dale worked in commercial leasing. I had grown my design studio from a 2-person operation into something with 6 employees and a client roster that included 2 boutique hotels and a regional restaurant group, work I was genuinely proud of, the kind of pride that quietly becomes part of who you are. We didn't fight much. People always ask that first. Were there warning signs? Were there arguments? And the honest answer is that our marriage wasn't loud enough to fight in. It was more like a house where one room at a time slowly stopped being used, until you looked up one day and realized you were only living in half the place. The person at the center of all this is a man named Theo Banwell. Theo was 42, a structural consultant I had hired 11 months before the divorce proceedings began, on a referral from a hotel client who swore by his work. We collaborated on 2 major renovation projects over the better part of a year. We had probably 30 or 40 meetings, most of them in my studio's conference room, a few of them on site at job locations, walking through blueprints in hard hats that did nothing for either of our hairstyles. We texted about permit timelines and material delays and whether a particular load-bearing wall could actually come down. We were colleagues. That is the entire truth of what Theo Banwell was to me, and it is the only truth that mattered until Dale decided a different one would be more useful to him. I noticed something was off about 6 months before any of this came to a courtroom, and I dismissed it almost immediately, which is something I still wince at when I think back on it. It was a Thursday evening in early spring. I came home late from a site visit and found Dale standing at the kitchen counter with his phone face down and an expression that looked deliberately arranged, like he had rehearsed it before I walked through the door. "Long day?" he asked. I said yes, exhausting, and asked if he was okay. He said he was fine in a tone that suggested the opposite, picked up his phone, and left the kitchen. I stood there for a minute, decided he was probably just stressed about work, and moved on with my evening. I did not think my husband is watching me. I did not think he has already decided what story he wants to tell about me. I did not think the stillness on his face was the particular stillness of someone who had already made up his mind about something and was simply waiting for the right moment. A few weeks later, Pepper got out through a door Dale swore he hadn't left open, and when I found her, 3 streets over at nearly 10 at night, something in my chest shifted. Not alarm exactly, more like the faint vibration of a string being plucked somewhere far away. I should have paid closer attention to that vibration. I didn't. A month before the court date, my attorney called me on a Tuesday afternoon, and the careful flatness in her voice told me before she said a single word that it was going to be bad. Her name is Priscilla Hahn, sharp, unflappable, the kind of attorney who delivers difficult news the way a surgeon delivers a diagnosis, clearly and without padding. "Renee," she said, "Dale's attorney filed a supplemental witness notice this morning. I need you to come in." "What's in it?" I asked. A pause. "He's planning to allege an affair with Theo Banwell. He's calling Theo as a witness, and he's also planning to introduce some photographs and a timeline he's calling corroborating evidence." I sat down on the floor of my own office, my back against the desk, the phone pressed to my ear. We had a site walkthrough at the Aldermont Hotel renovation, I said. Theo and I were there for almost 3 hours going through structural change orders. I have the project log. I have the email thread with the general contractor. I have my own calendar entry from that exact day. Do you have anything documenting the actual content of the visit? Priscilla asked. I have photographs of the site itself, time-stamped, I said, already standing, already moving toward my laptop. I have the change order paperwork we both signed that afternoon. I have everything, Priscilla. Good, she said. Bring all of it tomorrow morning. I spent that night pulling together 5 months of documentation, project logs, signed change orders, email threads referencing Theo by name in a strictly professional context, calendar invitations, site visit sign-in sheets from the hotel's own security desk, 31 separate pieces of paper, every single one of them mundane, dated and boring in exactly the way honest documentation usually is. I printed them, tabbed them, put them in a binder, and did not sleep. I thought about 9 years of marriage and how strange it was that the man who had once known every detail of my schedule was now apparently building a case against a version of me that did not exist. The morning of the hearing, Priscilla met me outside the courthouse. He is going to make this ugly before it gets better, she said. Let him. Do not react. Look at me or look at the judge. When it is our turn, we walk through everything. Calmly, in order. The first part of the hearing moved through standard procedural ground, asset disclosures, scheduling motions, the kind of administrative rhythm I mostly tracked at the surface while sitting very still in my chair. Dale's attorney, a precise, confident man named Roland Vance, eventually pivoted to the infidelity claim with the smooth certainty of someone who believed he already knew exactly how the next 20 minutes would go. Your Honor, Roland said, the plaintiff alleges that the defendant has been engaged in an ongoing romantic relationship with a man named Theo Banwell, a contractor she retained professionally over the past 11 months. We have photographs placing them together repeatedly, and we would like to call Mr. Banwell as a witness to establish the nature of that relationship. Dale stood briefly to gesture across the room toward Theo, who had just walked in through the back doors, and said, That is him, Your Honor. That is the man my wife has been secretly involved with for almost a year. There was a small ripple through the room, the kind of collective intake of breath a courtroom gives when something has just been said plainly that everyone had previously only been implying. Theo walked to the witness stand with the same calm, unhurried posture he brought to every job site walkthrough I had ever seen him conduct. He sat down, folded his hands, and when the bailiff asked him to state his name for the record, he did so clearly, without a trace of nervousness or guilt. Roland began his examination with the photographs, handing copies to the judge and narrating each one. Theo and I at the Aldermont site in hard hats. Theo and I at a diner near the renovation property, presumably discussing budget overruns over coffee that Roland described as an intimate breakfast. Theo and I standing close together in a parking lot, mid-conversation, which Roland framed as evidence of a private rendezvous. Mr. Banwell, Roland said, how would you describe your relationship with Renee Castor? Theo looked at him, then looked at me, then reached into his jacket and produced his phone. Your Honor, he said, before I answer that, I would like permission to play a short recording. The room went very still. Roland's head turned toward Theo, with the particular sharpness of a man who has just heard a phone call, Your Honor, between myself and Dale Castor, recorded with my own consent, which satisfies the one-party consent standard in this state. It was recorded approximately 3 months before today's hearing. Priscilla was already on her feet. Your Honor, the defense would like to hear this recording and move to admit it. Roland stood as well. Objection, Your Honor. This is entirely improper. The witness cannot simply introduce. Judge Voss raised a hand, not sharply, just enough to stop him mid-sentence. I would like to hear it, Mr. Vance. Sit down. Proceed, Mr. Banwell. Theo pressed play. The audio quality was clean enough that Dale's voice filled the courtroom without any ambiguity at all. Theo, listen. I know you and Renee work together. I know it is purely professional, but I need you to understand what I am dealing with here. She built that studio while we were married, which means under state law, it gets split as marital property. My attorney says if I can show infidelity, it changes the leverage on the whole division. I am not asking you to say anything that is not true. I am asking you to just not deny it clearly if anyone asks you directly on the stand. Let people draw their own conclusions from the photos. I will make sure it is worth your while. I am talking $15,000. The silence that followed had real weight to it, the kind you could feel pressing down on the room. Then Dale's voice again on the recording. You have been alone with her on job sites for months. Nobody actually needs proof of anything happening. They just need a reason to wonder. Theo stopped the playback. I looked at Judge Voss. Whatever had been on her face during Dale's initial accusation was gone now, replaced by something colder, and it was no longer aimed in my direction. Then came the question. Judge Voss looked directly at Dale, who had gone very still in his seat, and she asked it plainly, without raising her voice at all. Mr. Castor, did you offer this witness money to imply an affair you knew was not real? Dale opened his mouth. Nothing came out for a long moment. Roland Vance, beside him, had gone completely rigid. The posture of an attorney realizing in real time that his entire case had just been handed to opposing counsel by his own client's recorded voice. Dale finally said something about context, about how it was not exactly like that, and Judge Voss simply held up a hand again and said, "That will be all for now, Mr. Castor, and let the silence after that statement do the rest of the work." Priscilla moved quickly. She submitted Theo's full documentation, the recording, its metadata confirming date and time, and a follow-up text Dale had sent Theo 2 days later that read simply, "Think it over, the offer stands." She submitted my own binder, all 31 exhibits, tabbed and indexed, including the Aldermont Hotel's own security sign and logs, showing Theo and I entering and leaving together at the exact times listed in Dale's supposedly damaging photographs, alongside the change order paperwork we had both signed that same afternoon. Your Honor, Priscilla said at the podium, the plaintiff did not discover an affair. He attempted to manufacture the appearance of one, and when that did not produce enough material on its own, he attempted to bribe a witness into supporting a fabricated narrative. Every photograph submitted today has an entirely innocent, fully documented explanation. We would like to discuss sanctions. What followed over the next several weeks was not quick, and it was not painless. There were additional hearings. There was a formal referral regarding witness tampering, which carries real legal weight in this state, regardless of whether the bribe was ever accepted. Roland Vance withdrew from representing Dale shortly afterward. Dale hired new counsel, a quieter presence whose entire approach in subsequent hearings seemed focused on damage control rather than victory. The asset division was ultimately ruled substantially in my favor, on the grounds that my design studio had been built primarily through my own individual labor and client relationships, with Dale's contribution to its growth found to be minimal and largely incidental. I kept the studio. I kept the client roster. The house, the one with the porch that never got painted, was ordered sold, with the equity split according to what the court determined was fair given everything on the record. Dale was separately referred for prosecution on attempted witness tampering and ultimately accepted a plea to a reduced charge involving probation and a financial penalty. Theo texted me the day after the recording was played. He approached me about 2 months before the hearing, the message said. I told him no immediately. Then I decided to record any future conversation just in case he tried again. He did. I should have told you sooner. I am sorry I did not. I wrote back, you showed up exactly when it mattered. Thank you. We have not spoken much since. He has moved on to other projects. I think about him sometimes, about the specific kind of quiet integrity it takes to record a bribe attempt and then walk into a courtroom and play it out loud, knowing it would detonate a situation that had nothing to do with him personally. Pepper came with me, obviously, which was never even a point of negotiation. I live in a small rental closer to downtown now, 2nd floor, decent morning light, no porch to feel guilty about not painting. My design studio had its strongest quarter in years in the months after the divorce was finalized. There is something about surviving an attempt to publicly rewrite your own life that sharpens your focus in a way that is hard to manufacture any other way. My sister called me the week after the final ruling and said, I never trusted him. I said, you came to the wedding. She said, I wore navy, the color of regret. I laughed for the first time in what felt like a very long while. Here's what I understand now that I did not understand before. A marriage can end from silence just as completely as it can end from betrayal. And sometimes, the person doing the betraying is simply waiting for an opportunity to make their version of events look like the truth. I do not know exactly when Dale decided I had become a problem to be solved rather than a person to stay beside. I am not sure it matters anymore. What matters is this. I documented everything. Not because I suspected anything specific, just because that is how I have always run my professional life. And when someone tried to bend the truth into a shape that suited them, the documentation cut straight through it anyway. Keep your receipts in business, in marriage, in every part of your life that someone else might one day have a reason to misrepresent. Not out of suspicion, but out of respect for your own reality. Because you never know in advance which ordinary Tuesday you will eventually need